With me now, former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo, a Fox News contributor. Secretary Pompeo, always good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, during the course of the campaign, President Trump said, we can do this very quickly, within days. Now he's talking about a slightly longer time frame, but wanting to obviously get this negotiation started very quickly. What's your response to what he had to say there?
I'm unsurprised, Martha, at that statement. There's always been a story that somehow he was soft on Russia, right? The whole narrative for the first 2.5 years with the Russia hoax. The reality was Vladimir Putin didn't invade Ukraine on our watch because of President Trump, because we had a set of policies that deterred him. And so when I hear President Trump speak today, he's that same message, which is, we're going to be serious about this. You're not going to continue to kill innocent civilians in Ukraine. We're going to bring this violence to an end, and the time is now to do that. Or, much as we had done in the first administration, President Trump's very clear there will be real costs imposed on you when you behave in a way that's inconsistent with America's best interest.
Well, obviously, Russia knows that there's a new sheriff in town, and they have to readjust their thinking on all of this. And he says, President Trump says he would like to meet with and talk to Vladimir Putin. He's always been someone, and you helped aid in that with discussions with North Korea, who believes that conversation is a good thing, even with our adversaries. Here is the Russian deputy UN ambassador response to this. He says it is not merely a question of ending the war. It is first and foremost the question of addressing the root causes of Ukrainians' crisis. So we have to see, what does deal mean in President Trump's understanding? How do you read that?
Yeah, the story that Putin has told the whole time was this was somehow his fear that NATO was going to invade them, which is just ludicrous. That's an echo, at least, of that. Look, they're going to try and create some space. They do know that there's a new leader in America and that there will be real consequences, serious consequences, as President Trump, I think, alluded to their economy if they don't bring down the violence and actually bring a settlement. I think the deputy UN ambassador knows exactly what they're up against, and I think he's looking for a little bit of space so they can think about how is it they're going to respond to what President Trump not only said, but what he's prepared to do.
I mean, you got to believe that when the deputy UN ambassador is the person responding, they're thinking, they're talking, and they're thinking, right? So, in terms of the sanctions that could take place, give us a sense of what the Biden White House did, because, we all remember the minor incursion. If it's a minor incursion, maybe that would be something we would have to talk about, as I remember, something to that effect. Then there were sanctions against Russia, but they're, selling drones. They're doing all kinds of business. So what would be tougher? What would you imagine?
So, Martha, the sanctions business is serious stuff, and you have to both put them in place and enforce them. And the Biden administration really was halfway on both. They were afraid they would drive energy prices up because they didn't want to produce energy here in America. President Trump is going to relieve that pressure, that is energy prices, because we're going to drill, baby, drill, right? And so I think the place will start probably as in the energy space. He'll certainly tell secondary purchasers of Russian crude oil, no more, can't do that any longer. Those would be the places that will begin, and those will have a real impact on the Russian economy in a way that the Biden administration simply wasn't prepared to engage in.
So if there's a sanction against accepting Russian oil sales that's going through a country and then going to the other country, that would be off the list of options, right?
Martha, much as we did with Iran, we will enforce the secondary level sanctions against others who are engaged in that trade.
So, big question, what would Volodymyr Zelensky's response be to any potential deal? Here's a quote from what he said at Davos. He says, if Trump is ready to see Ukraine in NATO, we will be in NATO. All the members will be in favor of Ukraine joining NATO. If President Trump is not ready to see us in NATO, we won't be in NATO. And he also said, legally, we won't recognize, no matter what anybody wants, even if the allies of the world unite, we will not recognize occupied territories as Russian. It is impossible. We will not recognize them legally. And we all have seen, obviously, Donetsk, Luhansk, all of these areas, Crimea, during the Obama administration that have been slowly crept into by Russia. What's your response?
I think what President Zelenskyy said there is exactly right. There's the outlines of an outcome here, of a deal here. Right? We won't recognize them, but we will get security guarantees. That is, we will make sure that Vladimir Putin is never able to do this again. So I think you begin to see President Zelenskyy realistically saying, here's what we can achieve, here's what's possible, with President Trump being very clear to the Russians about the fact that they need to back down. I think you can begin to see how President Trump can actually deliver. Maybe not in the first 24 hours, but much more quickly than if President Biden or President Harris were in office.
Well, that's why you were the head diplomat, because you read into this sentence and see that he's not necessarily talking about pushing Russia out. He's just saying, we will always believe and put forth that is our territory, even if Russians are all over it.
President Zelenskyy knows that sometimes you have to solve the immediate problem, and you can solve the secondary problem another day.
Will Ukraine ever be in NATO while President Trump is president?
Oh, goodness, it's hard to know. It's possible. I frankly think this depends a lot on what the Europeans do. If the Europeans are prepared to actually step up and do, the United Kingdom says they'll do, what the Germans and the French have promised, if they actually deliver on their commitments to NATO, the world of possibilities begins to open up greatly.
Secretary Pompeo, thank you.
Thank you,
Great to have you
Great
here.
to be with you.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.